Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. Hey, what's going on? It's Coach Luka, and we're back with the Vigor Life Podcast with none other today than my special guest and friend from, he's actually my neighbor. Kind of, sort of. You know, like 10 minutes away in the U.S. is
20 minutes in traffic. But
20 minutes in traffic is my neighbor, Joel Jamieson. And here's the thing, right? If you guys haven't heard about Joel, we're going to kind of dig into a little bit of his background. But, to me, he's written pretty much the best book on conditioning, which is called MMA Conditioning. So it's really not about MMA, it's conditioning, period. And if you haven't copped that, you should definitely get that. If you're interested in just how to structure and like what conditioning is, how to use it into every platform of strength and conditioning, fitness, anything else, it'll kind of blow your mind. It was actually one of the first times that I started really looking deeper into conditioning and started understanding it, and everything we do here at Vigor now is based on that. But, on top of that, Joel is also owner of 8weeksout.com, HRV. We're talking about a lot of this stuff, but if you haven't checked him out, check him out. But Joel, thank you first for being here.
Hey, man, glad to be here.
And
no traffic at this time of day, so 10 minutes.
We do it at noon, man.
Exactly.
And but here I'm like kind of warp speed the kind of like your career in strength and conditioning and fitness, because I think it's pretty damn interesting.
It is. Like I said, I would never have guessed I'd be known as a conditioning guy when I first started. So for listeners who don't know who I am, my background at all, I started out like most strength coaches in strength. I wanted to get guys stronger, wanted to get guys bigger, wanted to get guys faster. And my first mentor was a guy named Bill Gillespie, who was a 700-pound bencher. I mean, the guy is a beast. I saw this guy at 325 pounds doing pull-ups with 4 plates around his waist for reps. Like, the guy is strong. And so that's really where I started. I went from there over to Seahawks, interned there for a bit, then opened my own facility. And that was really, my plan, my goal was just keep working with football, work with strength athletes. And then everything changed when I started working just with MMA. And it was a sport I didn't know anything about. The guys were weak from my standards from working with football players, and I assumed early on, like, just get them strong and then they're going to be better. And then I started training the sport myself, and they kicked my ass in 30 seconds because I was out of shape and I was stronger than them. But then as soon as the gas tank was empty, they were toying with me. So I realized, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing when it comes to conditioning. I got to figure this out. So I started just researching everything I could find about conditioning, talk to other guys that worked in combat athletes, going around to different conferences, just anything I could figure out to be a better conditioning coach, because I didn't want these guys gassing out and pointing the finger at me.
So when was that? When would you?
This is like 2004, 2005-ish. I believe the first guy, I opened the gym in 2003, so 2004 was the first combat athlete I worked with.
Because I remember, like, it was. Man, it's been probably 7-8 years ago when I met you, when I was in an amateur fight for Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah.
Because they were training out of like AMC was out of Vision Quest, right?
Yep.
And that's which kind of brings me to this that you had essentially opened the gym right next to
AMC. Yeah, I mean, I wish that was like my genius plan, but that was just sheer luck of being in the right place at the right time. And the funny thing is, at the time, no one really knew anything about MMA. I mean, Randy Couture and Reese Smith and Matt and I used to all go out to lunch, and no one ever came up and asked for an autograph. No one had any clue who these people were. They just had funny looking ears, and it was not a big deal. And then you fast forward a couple years after the show, the first Ultimate Fighter came out. The show really caused the sport to explode. Now we can't you couldn't go out to dinner or anywhere without people wanting pictures and autographs, and it just became this overnight explosion. And I just kind of was along for the ride, really.
Do you think that kind of I would say fast forwarded your not only your motivation to learn about it, but I'd say your skill set and your learning, right? Like learning it, being in the trenches. I mean, next door to some of the top MMA guys.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely did. I mean, I was very, very fortunate to be around a coach like Matt Hume. I mean, he is the best MMA coach in the world, and to see the athletes that he had coming in there. And like I said, the first guy I ever worked with was getting ready for a K1 fight, which is the epitome of the sport. I mean, he was training for a fight in Japan in front of 60,000 people. I mean, that was the first combat athlete I worked with. That's an athlete that thrown to the fire. Exactly. He's got his career and thousands of dollars on the line and thousands of people watching, and here I am not really knowing what to do. So I had to, sink or swim, right? You got to figure out what to do. And it absolutely caused me to have to become a better coach. So
and that's, I think definitely a lesson, right? I mean, outside of even like I say strength and conditioning, but just, you said yes to the opportunity, and then fuck it, like I'm going to learn all the stuff I need to learn versus going like, I'm not that good at it. I'll just put it off, right?
You got to jump in. You got to jump in. I mean, like I said, I could have turned him down, but I would have regretted it.
Yep.
So you don't know it, you better figure it out. And that's really what it came down to. So, the first day it was evaluation, see where he was at. And then I'm like, man, this guy's real weak. And so then I said, well, I'm going to go train the sport myself a little bit and see what this is all about so I can understand it better. And that was something I think was a pivotal thing choice I made, because it really opened my eyes to the sport's not what I thought from just watching it. You have to be able to feel it and to see what it's like and to understand how the fatigue hits you and what it means. And, like I said, it changed my perspective. But if I hadn't done that, I probably just would have kept trying to make them strong. And ultimately, it wouldn't have taken me that direction.
That is such a great point. How many people right now, I would say in any area of life, right? It's like I'm coaching somebody else through theory, but I've never experienced it. It doesn't mean you got to be become the best.
No, I mean, I'm not fighting anybody professionally, but
same here.
But I got my ass kicked by the best in the world. I can hold my own. I at least know the basics, and I know what it means to be in shape for a fight. And I'd spent probably the first year or so training with those guys every morning. We do the conditioning sessions in the morning, the strength sessions in the morning, and then they would do the MMA sessions in the evening. So I did all the morning sessions with myself. We had a group of guys that were coming in from Pride back then, and Matt. We'd all train together, and then I'd go and do some of the evening sessions with them. And it was just being a part of that sport and that group. Even though I was never going to compete, but it really taught me a lot about the sport and how to get guys ready for it.
And then with that said, I'd say it's come a long way, right? I mean, since then till now, as far as the science and understanding even conditioning and stuff. But still today, and I'm pretty sure that we're kind of on the same page with this. That in strength and conditioning, and even in fitness, where do you see conditioning is, right? I mean, there's still so many misconceptions.
Honestly, it's still large in the dark ages. And I say this because I'll bet you on any given day, in any given gym, you've got less than 10% of people using a simple heart rate monitor. I mean, probably 5% at best. Realistically, if you're not using any kind of heart rate monitor, it's like trying to lift weights without knowing what weight's on the bar. I mean, you're just guessing how heavy it is. You're guessing if you're getting better. You're guessing, what you should be doing. But just something as simple as a heart rate monitor is going to tell you what your heart rate's at. So that tells you essentially how much intensity you're using. And it's key to be able to really make progress in conditioning. But when you consider most people don't even do that much, I think it's still got a long ways to go.
And I think I've heard you say this before, that conditioning, I think still is taken as a side thing. It's I do my strength, I do my day, I do my physique training. And then, if you're in the physique world, it's I do my cardio to burn calories, right? It's
exactly.
If you're in strength and conditioning, it's okay, I push it so that I can push it on field, but there's no parameters. There's no
it's just the Wild West at best, And probably part of it is people can measure strength, right? They know what they're lifting, they know how far they're jumping, they know what their 40 time is. But to truly measure conditioning is not something most people have a good handle on. So if you don't know what your conditioning is and you can't really measure the progress in it, you're less likely to train it or to structure your program around it, because it's not something that's tangible. There's no feedback, exactly. So, I think guys just do it when they're getting ready for a season, or there's they have a conditioning test. They have to get ready for this test, or a fighter obviously has to get ready for a fight or competition. But people think of it too much in terms of a pre-event, I just got to get ready for this thing. Well, realistically, you need to be building the foundation throughout your program. It's not something you should just put at the end. It should be something that's part of everything you do.
And one of the things, with that said too, is one of the things that I've heard you say before, which I thought was really great, and what I started doing here is how you explain this to people, right? How do you pre-frame what conditioning is for that person? Even if, obviously, for me, majority of, 70-75% of our client base is body transformations, improvement health. But still, we start talking about this, how does conditioning relate to their life? When they start getting it, holy shit, this is what it is. This is, if I measure my progress here, this is what that means.
For the average person, I don't know if you guys check out the article 8 weeks out on how conditioning can save your life. That article is our most shared article by far. And I think it really opened a lot of people's eyes that, look, at the end of the day, most people want to live better, they want to look better, they want to feel better. The reality is there is nothing better than the aerobic system in developing conditioning to accomplish that. There's mountains of research that shows us VO2 max and aerobic fitness and all those corollaries are directly related to life expectancy. And I cited a paper on there where they looked at a review of 11 or 12 different studies on longevity, and lo and behold, they found that the only athletes consistently live longer than the average person are endurance athletes. And some of those papers actually showed strength athletes and team sport athletes lived shorter lifespans than the average person. And the reason endurance athletes live longer is simply because they have the highest levels of aerobic fitness. That protects against inflammation, that protects against free radicals, that protects against a lot of the things that cause aging and cause, the cornerstone of modern diseases. So at the end of the day, being strong is cool, but being in shape and being alive is better.
And that's, and you said too, like last time we talked that like you've seen this this correlation of the better the HRV score, the better life expectancy.
Oh, yeah,
and it's pretty much like measures like, hey, this shows your health in many ways, right?
It does. It predicts literally your life expectancy better than almost any single metric out there. Because again, what people don't understand is the aerobic system. It's the body's protection against all the stresses we throw upon ourselves. So food stress and mental stress and sleep stress and training stress, everything else. It takes its toll on the body. And your best protection, your best way to handle all that is to have a well-developed aerobic system, because it can mitigate against inflammation, because it can rebuild the tissues and regenerate things faster, because it's designed to help you protect against the stresses that you encounter in life. So,
in one word, I'd call it resilience, right?
Resilience is exactly what it is. It is exactly that. You
know what's crazy? Like I had Dan Swinsko, who's one of the guys, the physical therapist we refer to, really smart dude, great dude. Had him here for a podcast, and we were talking about back pain a lot, right? And he said, well, the only one thing that has actually been proven long term to improve like back pain is like aerobic activity.
Yeah,
right?
It's just simple blood flow. I mean, it's movement. The human body was designed to move. Movement basically causes blood flow to be circulated, or blood to be circulated to the body. There's a pumping action with just walking and gait as a whole that causes increased fluid transmission throughout the entire body. I mean, just the act of walking and moving around by itself promotes recovery, it promotes wellness, it promotes health. And if nothing else, just doing active, aerobic type work accelerates that process. So, you got to move.
And that's what, man, I'm glad you bring this up, because I hope people that are listening to this are like, shit, like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know it was all that, and like start researching it more. But then, we'll talk about this a little bit later, is how, because this is what I see, at least in a fitness professional world, is the people that are like, okay, conditioning is important, but it's like, how do you put it together? Because like, we're obviously both proponents of like getting stronger, smart. If power is important, even for elderly people. If they fall, they got to catch themselves. 1 out of 3 people break their hips, so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
But how do you put it all together where, hey, we're working on somebody's mobility and strength and power, but then also like putting conditioning in to where they can measure it and improve it long term, and it's not just all over the fucking place. Because let's be honest, like a lot of the stuff that I see, I'm sure that you see a lot of the same too, is like this makes no sense. This is just... Yeah, the strength is there, hypertrophy stuff is there, but this is just like whatever, right?
Yeah, it comes down to having a system. It's like anything else. You've got to research what are the elements that make up conditioning and what has to be developed. I mean, first and foremost, you have to develop the aerobic system, and it's more complicated than strength, simply because the aerobic system has a lot more moving parts. Mm-hmm. Strength is basically how big your muscles are and how many you contract at once, and your technique. I mean, that's strength. Aerobic fitness and conditioning is a bit more complicated than that, but it comes down to just having a system in place that incorporates it into your program as a whole. So just rules of thumb, if someone's on a lower level of fitness, you can pretty much smash it all together. You can train strength, you can train conditioning, you're going to get some results. But once you reach a certain level of fitness, you're better off kind of segmenting things. And I found better results just by the way the body's designed to have days that are more oriented towards strength and power, and days are oriented more towards aerobic fitness and conditioning, and separating those out a bit, which it works well together. It works well when you put it that way, because you don't really want to smash someone's strength 2 or 3 days in a row in the gym, but you can get in and do some lighter, lower level aerobic work in between, which number one will improve their conditioning, but number two will actually speed up the recovery from that strength work, so that now they go back in the next day or day after, and they're going to get better results out of their strength work because they put in that lower level aerobic work to help facilitate recovery and rebuild everything. So they do go together when they're programmed properly. You just, for most people, you just have to have some structure there where there's an emphasis for each day, and the program's built around that, rather than just let's just do whatever we feel like all the time.
And it's like, would you say that this is like something that's going on, right? It's like because of where we live, like high intensity interval training, and like push it, and like obviously you go on Facebook, there's all these memes, like everything's got to be hard. That there's like, and training hard is important, obviously it's important, but not having enough, let's just say lower intensity training that actually could help a ton if you understood it and how it fits into the program.
And I think people mistake, I talk about this a lot, people mistake intensity for results. I mean, if it was just a simple case of train as hard as you possibly can, then everybody would be in decent shape these days, because everyone's killing themselves in the gym, but it's not that simple. So the biggest thing is consistency, I've seen, and consistency always trumps intensity. Someone who's consistently in the gym 5 to 6 days a week, even if they're only going hard once or twice, is in the long run going to outpace someone who's in there 4 days a week crushing themselves, because sooner or later, that person that's killing themselves 4 or 5 days a week is going to have injuries. They're going to have plateaus. They're going to overtrain. They're going to fall apart, and they're just going to keep banging their head against the wall, versus a guy who's consistent in the gym, pushing himself a couple of days a week, taking it more moderate the rest of the days. He's going to make maybe shorter or less improvements in the first month, maybe even 2 months, but in the long run, it's going to keep on building. And the funny thing is, if you look at the research, that's literally exactly what you see. The Tabata study that everybody loves to cite for high intensity, if you look at the changes in fitness from the Tabata group, they improved for 3 weeks and then they completely plateaued. The lower intensity group went 6 weeks with steady improvements throughout and actually ended up with higher VO2 maxes at the end, which people like to talk about. But slow and steady and consistent wins the race, not smashing yourself into the ground.
It's funny because we were just listening to Derek Halpern write about speed training and Charlie Francis stuff, like high and low.
Yep.
And people live in medium, and like nobody actually gets results.
If you talk to, I actually went to Charlie Francis's course in Vancouver many years ago, and I think someone asked him, like, what was the overall percentage of high versus low that you guys did? He's like, our athletes probably, I think the number he shot out was like 20, maybe 25% of high and the rest low. I mean, their minds are blown. You think about the fact that you're dealing with the highest speed athletes in the world, the most anaerobic athletes really there are, just about. And the vast majority of their training was at lower intensities, and only a certain percentage of it was at the true high intensities. And Charlie was a big proponent of the high-low system, just because, like you said, too many people train this 80 to 90% range where they're not really training hard to cause their body to get better, but they're also not training easy enough to allow their bodies to recover, and they're stuck in this middle ground. I think that happens all the time.
Be able to be mediocre for a long period of time, and it's like,
exactly.
If you put it that way, it's like, shit, I don't want that.
Yeah, no, you think you're training hard, but the reality is you're so fatigued from the last time you crushed yourself. You're not training at the intensity you think you are. You just feel fatigued because you've done it 5 days in a row. Yep,
and that is why people need to know more about conditioning.
No, absolutely.
Straight up. I mean, and so here, like, as I've been, like, for the last 5 years, just a huge proponent of everything brain neurology, behavior change, right?
Oh yeah.
And I really like your take, because when people talk about conditioning, here's the other thing that they'll never talk about is the brain.
So the brain's central to it. It's central to the whole thing.
And it's like, I like to get into the why, because then when people understand it better, I think that it's easier for them to go like, okay, that makes sense. Now I see why I need to do more of this. Yep. So, just talk a little bit about how, like, the brain actually regulates everything when it comes to cardio. And, like, if people saw this perspective, maybe it would, like, make a shift of, like, holy shit, like, I need to look more into this and study this better.
Yeah, there's two things. The first thing is the brain is what controls energy expenditure. And energy expenditure is essential to life, obviously. And so the brain makes decisions, essentially subconscious decisions, about how much energy needs to be expended to accomplish a given task. And then it basically asks, how valuable is this task? Is this worth expending a bunch of energy for in the first place? And simply biology. If you look back at evolutionary biology, when you're in the wild and you're having to make decisions like, should I go trade 50 miles across the desert to try to find more food? Or should I sit my ass here and wait for more food to come to me? These are life and death decisions, right? Yeah. Because if you make the decision to go search for food and you don't find food, you're going to die, right? So our brains are essentially designed to dictate how much energy we expend by valuing the work that we're doing and by judging the task at hand. And so when you're talking about training, it's a lot of energy output. It's a lot of work to go do sprints or lift weights or do whatever. And the brain has to make the decision whether or not it's worth it. And so the part of how it does that is how the task is framed. And people, this is just kind of go back to motivation and why people do this. When people understand the true benefit of the conditioning they're doing, how it's going to change their life expectancy, how it's going to make them feel better, look better, all those sorts of things, they're much more likely to do it intelligently, and their body's going to produce the energy that's necessary versus what you get now, where people see great weeks for a few results for a few weeks, and then ultimately everyone stops training the gym in February and March, right? Yeah. So if you're talking about the average general population client, the biggest thing is just showing them a progression and having them understand why they're doing the things they're doing, and not crushing them, because crushing them, again, it's only going to work for so long before they plateau. And as soon as the brain starts to see no results from all the hard work, they're going to stop doing it. It just comes down to, like, why am I in the gym 4 days a week killing myself and not really feeling better, looking better, except for the first 4 weeks of the program?
It's like a pattern, and this is why it's so important, right? Because when you program that, it's like, okay, if I work harder, I get results. Yep. Then I stop getting results. Well, then that means I need to work even harder, or F it, right? I'm done, right? And that's what you tend to see is like then people work harder and harder and they burn out. They don't get results. They actually go backwards.
Exactly. And
there's no like progressive.
No, there's no progression. And then the other thing is the way the brain works too is it's always analyzing the environment that's in and deciding how much energy it needs to produce, like I talked about. And so a lot of this, when I was talking about motivation, is kind of your general population area of the brain, what its role is. But now we're talking about performance. It comes down to the brain being familiar with the environment, because the more familiar with it is, the more it knows how to control the energy effectively, and it gets better and better and better at only producing as much as necessary, not as much as possible. So people often think of things backward. They think of conditioning as, I want to produce as much energy as I can for 15 minutes straight. Yeah. No, conditioning is producing only the minimum amount necessary for 15 minutes straight, because that's how you're going to actually be optimizing your performance. So a lot of conditioning from a performance standpoint comes down to the brain just recognizing the environment and recognizing the right pattern of energy output and recognizing the opponents and recognizing how to pace itself properly. And these are all things that you need to teach the athletes how to do. This is part of conditioning. That's not just go bang 3 rounds of 5. You need to teach the athletes how to pace themselves and when to go and when to not go. And you see athletes that are well conditioned have poor performance all the time because it looks like they have bad conditioning simply because they had a poor execution. They had poor management of the energy. So it's energy management and energy expenditure is a skill. There's a subconscious and there's a conscious component of it, and it needs to be trained if you're talking about athletes. And then again, for the general population client, you just need to show them progress, and you need to show them the value of what they're doing and why they're doing it, and make sure they're able to see the direct improvements and outcome from their work.
Yeah, and I think like understanding this is important to get the message across, right? And like, sometimes I'll talk about biological power. People are like, what the hell is that, right? But it's like you got to start explaining that and even going like, hey, why does this guy gas out so fast? And like, where is his aerobic power at? And what's the gap? And why did you, once you get gassed, like your punches just lose 50%?
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And once you explain that, people go like, shit, like this makes sense.
Yep.
And then they buy into what you're teaching. And I think it goes the same from general population.
It comes down to people always want to understand what they're doing and why it's going to help them. That's what it comes down to. No one's going to go to their job and work for a year without getting paid for it or understand why the work they're doing is beneficial, right? You need to work with athletes, general population clients, anybody, and they need to understand clearly what they're doing and how it's going to benefit them. What's in for me is just the way we're built. What's in it for me? I mean, again, why is the brain going to tell you to go do all this work if there's nothing in it for you? It doesn't make any sense. And subconsciously, again, if you want to keep clients in the long run, you want to keep people for 6 months or a year in your gym rather than 4 weeks, they need to understand the value you're delivering. They need to understand the value of the work that they're doing while you're in your gym. And that's what it comes down to. And delivering structured programs, showing them consistent progress, explaining the process, having them focus on short-term milestones rather than these long-term goals that may take 6 months. It's better to have them focus on a goal that they can accomplish in 6 weeks or even better, 6 days, 7 days. Yep. There should be a weekly goal. There should be a workout goal. There should be a monthly goal. The shorter term you can make it, the better, because people want to reach goals. They want to make progress, but most people have a hard time if the goal is 6 months out or a year out. That's a hard thing to shoot for. Yeah. Why do athletes that are in contract years perform better than athletes that aren't? You perform better in contract year because it's a direct benefit to the performance that year. You make more money if you perform better. And taking your clients and having them structure their training around these short-term goals is a much better approach.
And the thing is, I think some of it is expectation. I know when people come in here, if you don't give people expectations, it creates uncertainty, which creates anxiety.
Well,
right?
the problem too is, big problem I would say, is people come in with completely unrealistic expectations. A better way, they have expectations, they're just built on bullshit marketing and the social media and these P90X pictures that are photoshopped that everybody knows are photoshopped, but in the back of their mind they're still thinking that could be me, right? I mean, everyone's watching infomercials thinking that could be me, and the problem is they're coming into the gym thinking like maybe that this guy is going to do that for me, but the reality is, unless you're talking about photoshopping pictures of you, it's not going to happen. So setting the correct expectations is a really important thing, because people's when their expectations aren't met, that's the big decreaser in dopamine. That's the dopamine killer. That's the motivation killer. Mm-hmm. So if someone comes in expecting to lose 10 pounds and they lose 5, they're like, oh man, I didn't reach my goal. I only lost 5 pounds. If someone else comes in and you say, look, you're going to hit 5 pounds of weight loss, and they hit 5 pounds of weight loss, now they're happy. They met their goal. Even though they both achieved the same result, the person who expected to achieve it is going to be happy. There's a person that expected to hit, double that is pissed off and thinks your program didn't work. So it's hugely important to set very clear expectations from the start.
And it's
map that out for them.
It's like that saying, it goes, right? People overestimate what they can do in 12 weeks, underestimate what they can do in a year.
Yep.
And if they hit the goal, there's so many things that happen. Confidence boost, right? They feel successful, like they believe in you more, they believe in the program more, like all these great things happen.
Yeah, people inherently overestimate their ability. It's just kind of how humans are built. So there's a bunch of research out there. If you look at, you can tell people a bunch of disease statistics. So you can say, look, 1 out of every 3 people gets cardiovascular disease. 1 out of every 10 people, whatever the hell it is, gets cancer. And then you have surveys about what people predict their own likelihood of getting diseases are, and they're like a fraction of reality, right? Everybody has this bias towards their own performance, their own unlikelihood to be one of the next. It's everywhere. It's just how we're wired, right? Because the food study was like people thought that they ate more protein than they did. Yeah, exactly.
And it said that they ate way less carbs and sugars than they did. Yeah. It was just like super skewed,
people
40%.
Completely skew it. So my point is they walk in their door and they think they're going to be the exception. And then when their progress is good, if that was the expectation going in, they're ultimately going to be dissatisfied with the results. So setting those very clearly. I mean, people expect to do things that are literally not possible. You can have the best genetics in the world and be on every drug known to man. You still wouldn't get those results they think they're going to walk in on the street and get. I mean, it's completely, it's impossible. And when you pick up a fitness magazine and I'm going to put 90 pounds on my bench in 4 weeks. I mean,
but I mean, that's the responsibility, I think, of the coach and the content that you put out, like things like this, where somebody can go like, wow, okay, like these guys know their stuff and this is what they're saying. This is reality. Maybe I should kind of adjust, what I'm thinking. But I think it's the responsibility of the coach, which then leads to I had to bring this up because I'm coaching some people that are actually recovering from these things, but in the realm of like both high school strength and conditioning, college strength and conditioning, and I would say general fitness now, where it's become insanely popular to do a lot of crazy, military, whether it's huge Spartan races, SEAL Fit 20X, Kokoro, which like I'm not, the events, I'm not opposed to them because they're trying to prove a point, build mental. There's obviously a point to them, but the training leading up to it, it's what is your take on toughness training, right? I'm gonna train you to be tough, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of toughness actually comes down to, again, how much does the brain value what it is you're trying to accomplish. People are very mentally tough. It's because they don't want to lose. They value winning and they hate to lose. And there's a lot of their self-worth wrapped up in a lot of those things. If you look at the people that are most mentally tough, in a lot of ways, it's because they have the biggest fears of losing. And they're the most insecure in some way. I mean, if you look at, I think Walter Payton was famous for, and Jerry Rice even, like, they were afraid of losing. They were afraid of failure, and that drove their ass into the ground or into the gym every single day to do whatever it took to perform, and they were able to do it. So, I think that there's benefits to doing that sort of training. Like you said, there's benefits for people to learn their limits. There's benefits to people to, achieve new markers they didn't think possible. But the process has to be right. People can't go in the gym every day to kill themselves to get there. Those should be tests. Those shouldn't be, things you do every day in the gym, ways of training. Exactly. If you look at the military, they're not trying to get people in great shape. They're trying to find the people who can't hack that environment, because if you can't hack that environment in the real world, you're going to get killed.
Absolutely.
They're not trying to make you the best athlete possible or the best in shape possible. They're trying to literally see who can survive and who can't.
I mean, it's kind of like with like China, Bulgaria, right? It was like, let's put thousands of people through.
It's just a meat grinder.
People that make it. Well, you guys are going to be able to handle like the world class stuff. It's not like some model that you can go, because I've heard this before. Well, this is what the top Olympic guys do. I'm like, but you can't do this with the general population.
No, I mean, the top Olympic guys, 99.9% of those guys in that program failed. It's the 0.1% that made it through. And again, you're probably not dealing with the 0.1%. You're dealing with the 99.9%. You can't build a program that's designed for 99 of them to fail out of 100. So people need to just, again, there's no reason that you don't let someone do those sorts of events, but the training leading up to them needs to be, not the event itself. And the funny thing is, if you look at, I've had a chance to see a lot of top CrossFitters in terms of their programs, and I've talked to a lot of successful CrossFit gym owners that work with tons and tons of high-level CrossFit Games athletes, and their programs are actually not CrossFit in the slightest. They're very well thought out. They use high intensity and lower intensity. Their focus is on technique. I mean, they have a much different take on high intensity and CrossFit than your average CrossFit gym owner, or your average CrossFitter, I should say. So, I think the more you train, the longer you're in this business, the more you're around it, the more you realize, like, you can't run yourself into the ground 5 days a week and expect to last. So I think the more intelligent coaches are out there that can preach that message, the quicker people are going to figure it out.
Yeah, because with that, you said technique, and obviously, like this is with like I said, high intensity interval training and classes where you're doing just crazy volumes and stuff like that with more technical lifts, and or training for, the ruck challenges, the SEAL Fit 20Xs and stuff like that, where you have people that are motivated to do something. They got this goal, and they probably have a lot of limitations in mobility and conditioning, and their energy system, their relative strength. I mean, you name it. And then now you're compounding this with tons of volume, right? So if your technique is good for the first, I don't know, like half an hour, like what happens after that? And what are we really training, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everything comes down to technique. And if you actually watch the CrossFit Games, the athletes that win, their technique doesn't look terrible. I mean, they get tired, but they don't look like, they're having a seizure out there. They're actually able to perform with a reasonable level of technique because that's how they've been trained and that's what they've done in practice. So there's, again, you want to make yourself fatigued, and a lot of times, that's part of conditioning, but it doesn't mean that your technique should throw out the window. And I think that's actually probably the biggest misconception about conditioning is that there's no correlation between, being fatigued and your ability to maintain technique. You can maintain your technique when you're fatigued if you're trained that way. But if all you're doing in the gym is saying go as hard as you can, go as fast as you can, if your only keys to your athletes or your clients are go hard or go fast, and they're giving them no technical feedback, then of course they're just going to go hard and go fast, and their technique is going to be terrible. And the problem is that when they get out in the competition or the field or whatever, and they're tired, their technique is going to look the exact same as it did in practice.
Yes.
Technique should be coached at all times. Fatigue is just another one of those times. So, to me, the more tired someone gets, instead of focusing on just trying to push them harder, you should be focusing on the technical things, keeping their heads up, keeping their posture right, putting their arms in the right position, whatever the case may be, depending on what they're doing. But, teaching people to maintain composure and maintain technique when they're fatigued is one of the most important elements of conditioning. It's completely overlooked because people have this mindset of, oh, he's tired, I'm just going to make him work harder. No, he's tired. You should teach him how to work smarter and more effectively and use his energy wisely. Don't expend as much as possible. Again, teach him how to conserve and only produce the energy he needs to get through that particular part of the event or the competition or whatever.
Because you mentioned like Dan Pfaff, like as far as his coaching and teaching. My brother just was there last week for 6 days doing the internship.
Yep.
And he said it was amazing how so it's Altus out in Arizona, and how how much focus to details there is.
Oh,
he said it was unreal.
I've been out there that course myself, and the biggest thing you'll see is Dan and their therapy team, a friend of mine, Jerry Ramagita, runs that, and Stu McMillan, is incredibly detailed. Dan will watch some warm ups, right, and he'll see, okay, maybe his ankle looks like it's not moving the way I want it to, or maybe his arm position is not quite where he wants it. So he'll send him over to the therapist. Therapist will do some manual therapy. Dan will give him a couple cues, and they'll go back in and finish the warm up. I mean, it's this constant tweaking, adjustment of, you're talking the smallest of details, but you see those details add up over 6 months of training. And now you're talking about a world champion versus somebody who got injured, and fell apart. And
there it's like, obviously, it's like the smallest things can be win or lose.
Yep.
But I see a correlation to the, because somebody will say like, well, how does this they basically coach people up to 800 meters and nothing more, and it's obviously north-south speed, but still, how can you correlate this to like a general gym? And like for me personally, it's us bringing in people like manual therapists and Dan that can do a bunch of different things. And I can go to somebody like, hey, like go get checked out. And then you work with them to make things better, because then you educate the client going like, hey, look, this is what's happening because you can't dorsiflex here, your hip stuck. Like when you do too much of this, you're going to get hurt.
Jerry, my friend, Jerry works with Stu for years, has a big thing that he got from Guy Boyer, who's a really known osteopath. It's micro movement dictates macro movement. And that's just the reality of your ankle can't move properly. Now your knee's in a bad position, now your hip's in a bad position, and works its way up the chain. So, you got to pay attention to the details as well as the big picture. And I think coaches have gotten really good at looking at lots of little movement tricks. I mean, FMS has gotten out there and people are trying to, focus on movement. But again, the problem is it's only being emphasized in warm-ups and cool-downs and correctives and fresh. They completely lose sight of it. People move under higher loads and high velocities. Your emphasis on movement shouldn't go away. Your emphasis shouldn't go from like these perfect movements in warm-up to these shitty movements when you're tired. I mean, you should be coaching movements throughout the spectrum all the time. And you should have cues around, the same sorts of things you're cueing when people are fresh. You should be cueing even more so when they're tired and when their conditioning is, under stress. That's when you should be teaching them how to control posture and positioning, all these sorts of things.
And creating an environment. So this is like this, man, you make a great point in here, because creating an environment, see, I like to believe that, like, with Vigor Ground, we'll stop stuff, right? Because somebody goes like, no, but I'm training super hard. I should be pushing myself some smoke. Having permission for yourself to stop and educate and go like, well, here's what's going on. Yep. Let's regress you to this position. Now you can do it right and still work hard. And they're like, wow, this is harder than, it's harder to do it right than it was to do it sloppy, because you were more efficient in a sloppy manner, right?
Yeah, people's mindset needs to change about what is hard, or what is the goal here. Yeah. Again, that goes back to the coach's responsibility, the expectation. The expectation is you're going to do, this drill properly, as fast or as well as you can do it, but you're not going to do it poor with technique. You're not just going to slop your way through it and as fast as you can and call that good. You're going to learn to execute under perfect technique. That should be the goal. That's what's more difficult.
Because the goal is not a hard training session. No, the goal is the result.
The goal is exactly. The goal is the end result, which is to get better. Yeah. You don't get better by just going as hard as you can every rep of every set of every workout. You're ultimately going to plateau and fatigue and overtrain and get injured at some point if that's all you go in the gym to do.
So if you could round it up, what if for a coach, like, what would be the 2 or 3 points? I'm not going to do what's your top 3, just whatever comes to mind, like the top 2 or 3 points of when it comes to conditioning, like what, if somebody could take them away right now to make their programs better.
I'll give you just a couple there. Number 1 is have a way to track and show people progress. And the easiest way to do that is simply with a heart rate monitor.
Monitors, yep.
Okay. And if you're not using a heart rate monitor, you're working out, it's literally like lifting weights without knowing what's on the bar. Get a heart rate monitor, learn how to use it, get an app, get a watch, whatever you feel comfortable with, and use them in your training. And you can show people tremendous progress. If someone's running 8 miles an hour and they're 160, their heart rate one week, and the next week they're 150, that's an improvement.
Yep.
If week 1 it takes them 60 seconds, their heart rate only dropped by 20 beats, week 2 it dropped by 30 beats. That's improvement. The resting heart rate goes from 65 to 55, that's improvement. So again, going back to having a way to show people progress, the heart rate monitor is the best investment you can make. So I would say that's number 1. Number 2 is coach technique and everything you do, like we just talked about, and make that the goal. Perfect technique under all conditions. And conditioning fatigue is just a conditioning to learn how to move well in. And then, I'd say 3 is have a mixture of intensities. There's a time and a place for a variety of intensities, and there's a time and place for smashing yourself, and there's a time and place for the exact opposite. And you'll get just as much out of the recovery sessions and the lower intensity sessions as you do out of the higher intensity sessions. So, if you can track your progress, you can have a progression. If you can train technique and movement, and you can have a range of intensities, intelligent programming, you're going to be 95% of the way there. Everything else is really just detailed after that.
And that's boom. You smashed that into 3.
There you go.
I'm gonna flip the script a little bit and go like, balance is such a huge part. Coaching stuff that happens outside of the gym obviously has become more and more important, because we see people 3-4 hours a week. That would be great. And then you got 164, 65, whatever it is. The balance part, and more like, I'm going to ask you, with athletes that you train, what are some things that you discuss about balance, and like even in your life, I kind of know where you get balance from, what relaxes you, but that conversation, like how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think it goes down to, like you talked about, the first part is just framing the educational components around training. It's what you do outside the gym is equally important or more important than what you do outside the gym or in the gym. So number 1, I think you can give people things they can do outside the gym that are going to promote recovery. And how do you do that? Well, you teach them how to use a heart rate monitor. Again, things that drop their heart rate down using some sort of biofeedback are going to be relaxing and recovery regenerative for them. So finding things that they enjoy, whether it's maybe they like massage, maybe they like the sauna, maybe they like hot tub, maybe like whatever, maybe they like to listen to certain music. But people need to find things that bring their heart rates down and reduce that stressful inputs from their daily lives. So teaching them how to do that in the gym by showing them how to control their heart rate. I call it dynamic heart rate control. It's literally just teaching people how to get in positions where they can drop their heart rate down. So a lot of the PRI stuff, a lot of the IFAST stuff they talk about, this respiratory function, just teaching people how to recover is an important part of training. And then once you've given them the tool set, it's just making sure they're actually doing those things outside of the gym and they're actively engaged in recovery too. Is just obviously nutrition and sleep are hugely important. So it's important to have a nutritional component to your program. It's important to focus on this integrated lifestyle, this wellness lifestyle. I call it, move, train, eat, sleep, recover. That's kind of the fitness lifestyle, and making sure they're being active, making sure they're obviously training intelligently, they're sleeping, they're recovering, and their nutrition's on point. So a lot of it comes down to just having that education in place and having it structured. So, I think that most gyms out there would be far better off if they had some sort of, 10 or 12 week program of foundational education material where, week 1, you're going to learn about stress. Week 2, you're going to learn about, basic nutrition. Week 3, you're going to learn about sleep or whatever the case may be. And just building that into your program and considering it a part of your program and a necessary part that everybody has to learn and go through. Rather than just kind of letting people figure it out on their own. So it's just a structure, right? It's a system. It's a program that needs to be there from the start.
Because it's like the pieces to the puzzle, like lifestyle management. It's crazy. Exactly. I did my blood work in January. My hormones were shot because I've been, for the last decade, I've been shit about sleep, overworking. So I started for the last 8 months. I've slept on average about 7+ hours a night. My blood work came back completely different. I'm training less, hitting PRs, feeling better, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was
massive difference.
It was just sleep, right? Yep. And that was my main variable that I changed. And it's so important because people are always like, man, how do I tweak my training more? It's like, man, you got it. Exactly. What are you doing on the other parts of it? And once again, education. I think you make a great point. How to make it education based when somebody comes in. It's not just like, here's your program, here's this, but here are the things that affect your life. And now with that education, people make better decisions and have choice and autonomy and things like that.
Exactly. And then, that's what, to me, I think we've gotten, I wouldn't say overboard, but people are using all the wearables and they're not really getting anything out of them, right? I mean, that's where you can actually educate people about how to use technology intelligently, whether it's heart rate variability or just sleep monitoring or activity monitoring. You should have some programs around look, what's the reasonable amount of sleep to get? Well, you can measure that now, right?
Yeah.
You can see what sleep you're getting. You can look at your recovery with HRV. You can look at your activity. You can look at your heart rate. You can look at all these things. So it's, I think if you really want to be a good trainer or coach, you got to stay in the forefront of that stuff. So that means putting some work in to learn how this stuff works and give your athletes or give your clients, the tools that they need to monitor these things and see what their sleep's actually. It doesn't have to be all the time, but if they at least, like you found, you monitor sleep for 2 or 3 weeks and you realize, man, I'm not getting nearly as much sleep as I thought I was. It's an eye opener for a lot of people. So again, I think you can build that into your education, you can build that into your programming, but just making a holistic program versus just a gym where you come and work out is really the answer to getting long-term results for people.
And what you bring up really is assessment precedes awareness precedes change. You can't change something you don't know is wrong, right?
Yeah. Well, people too, they inherently think the gym is the most important thing, like you mentioned, but you said it's the other 23 hours a day that are going to make or break what you did in the gym, because you could probably train, twice as hard if your lifestyle was completely in balance and you had everything dialed in.
And you get faster results.
You get way faster results, but most people's lives aren't, completely dialed in. And so you've got to take that into account when you go in the gym. If you're not sleeping well and you're stressed out at work and your diet's horrible, you can't go in the gym and kill yourself, because that's just going to exacerbate the problem. So people need to realize it's all connected. Everything is connected. What you do in the gym, what you do out of the gym, when you sleep, you eat, all of this is just one big puzzle put together. You can't, consider them separate pieces that you can just isolate and do whatever you want with. They're all integrated and they all matter.
I'm optimistic, man, in that next 5-6 years, this is what's gonna, I hope that most people are grabbing onto this right now and studying it.
I think there is, I think that I get enough emails and have enough, people comment. Like, I think enough people out there have smashed themselves in the ground long enough now to know that it's not the best long-term solution. And I think they're looking for, more holistic, more integrated solutions. And I'm working on something we've talked about to help people out with that. But I think the next, 3-5 years, you're going to start to see people more aware of these things and people taking a more active role in their recovery and their health. And, I think the more we can start to actually leverage technology, make those things easier rather than more difficult, and the more we can start educating clients and trainers. And, like I said, I was overwhelmed. The response to my article on conditioning in life was the best article we've ever had. And it wasn't really a training article. It was just about, stress and life and how you put those, how those two are related. And people were massively interested in it. So I think, we'll hit a turning point. More and more people will start talking about this stuff, and you'll start to see, a much more wellness sort of approach versus a let's go kill ourselves approach. And the gyms that embrace that and that teach that and that have, holistic type programs, they're the ones that are going to be standing. The CrossFit gyms where you just bury yourself in the floor, or any group fitness where you literally, just kill yourself day. Those gyms are going to come and go. And you can only grind through so many people. Yeah. And if it comes down to just like, hey, we kick your ass and it's like in and out, and there's not like a whole approach of, what's happening in your life, I think, for real, the next 5 years, I think you become relic. I absolutely agree. I think it's, people are looking for something that's more effective in the long run. And the fads will always come and go, but, I think people start to realize that, there's only one way to long-term results, and that's to put the pieces together and to be constantly working to put those pieces together, not to just go in the gym and crush yourself every day and think that's all you have to do. Because like I said, if it's that simple, then we'd be walking around everybody in great shape.
Everybody be ripped in the best,
but they're not, right? It's not that simple. Exactly.
All right, so man, two things, right? What's firing you up and motivating you in business, and then what's firing you and motivating you outside of business, just like in life stuff?
So in business, like I said, we're working on some really cool stuff I'm excited about. And I won't get the details now.
I was gonna say, like,
not quite ready.
We're not ready.
Not quite ready to get there, but just we're working on some stuff that I think is gonna be game changing. I think it's gonna give people exactly what we've just talked about. It's gonna help them put the pieces of their life together. It's gonna help them see the value of this integrated approach, and it's gonna make it easier for them to do it rather than a lot more difficult. So that's really what's got me fired up on the business side of things. On life side of things, just flying more helicopters, more airplanes, flying more stuff.
If you guys don't know, like, Joel likes to be in the air a lot. Man, so and by the way, for me, meditation is, man, when we went flight over to Puget Sound in Seattle with a plane and land on the water, man, it's one of the most relaxing things that you can do. You think it's like all the stress and stuff. It's actually
it's away
peaceful.
From the stress, right?
Oh,
you see the stress down below. You're in a car, you're the one on the freeway, and you're up above that.
It's literally relaxing. Like this: separate myself from the issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you get a chance to do some flying over beautiful places, and you can do it consistently, do it. With the helicopter, depending on how many turns and drops you're doing, it may be a little bit more stressful.
We were doing lots of stuff that probably was not the most relaxing, but
it was fun either way. So it was dope.
The important thing is just that's what relaxes me, and you obviously find relaxing. People need to find some sort of outlet in their lives. I don't care if it's flying or driving or meditating or float tanks or who the hell cares what it is, but people need to find that relaxing outlet, because I can tell you just from my own health and wellness that if I go a couple of weeks and the weather is crappy and I haven't flown, like, it has a toll on me. If I can go relax and fly and get out and just it makes a big difference. So people need to find whatever that happy place is for them and make a concerted effort in their schedules. I don't care if you're busy, you got work, you got school, whatever. You need to incorporate those things into your life if you want to be healthy and you want to have, again, long-term results rather than get in shape for a month and then fall apart.
And part of that is also because it's going to bring me to the last part, man. Like, right now you have a conditioning cert that's about to actually is ready to go.
We're ready to go now.
Yeah, so it's ready to go and talk a little bit about like what people go through and get when they go through the strength and conditioning course. Like, I know, and if you haven't checked out all of Joel's work, you got to do it. But seriously, if you want to become excellent at understanding this stuff and programming it into your programs and helping people get from point A to point B, and even explaining it and getting people on board, I'm telling you, this is the best course out there. But I'll let Joel, what does somebody go through when they go through the course?
Yeah, so we really went through the last 10 years of my career, and I tried to summarize it and synthesize it down into it's about 13 hours of material, 55 videos, and it's literally everything from A to Z you need to know for conditioning, whether you're talking about a general population client, it could be a world-class athlete, or really anyone in between. So it goes through different areas. It goes through the conditioned body. So I talk about how the body works, how the energy systems work, how do these things work together, what does mobility and all these things look like. Then it's the brain. So again, we talked a little bit about it by going into much more in depth of how the brain works, how it relates to conditioning, how we train it, just how to develop that into your program. And then we go into programming, and that's where we get into how to program for team sports, combat athletes, endurance athletes, tactical athletes, really this whole wide range of athletes. I really wanted to make it practical so people can walk away with the tools they need to create a program for anybody. Testing assessment, of course, is a big part of that. We go over that, and then train methods. So I go over, I think, 15 or 16 train methods and show you exactly how to coach them, what to say, what heart rate should be, how you coach the heart rate. It's really cool. We shot the heart rates on the monitor on an iPad, and then we basically videoed them in there. So you can see people's heart rates live while I'm taking them through the methods. You can see what we're actually looking for and how we coach them. So again, I really try to put just everything you need to know to coach somebody to improve their conditioning, whether you're trying to get someone ready for a fight, whether they're trying to get ready for a competitive season, whether they're doing a Tough Mudder or whatever, or whether they just want to look and feel better and they're not trained for anything. I try to put all the pieces together that they need to do that. So it's the most comprehensive course as far as conditioning's out there by far.
So first of all, like I mentioned MMA conditioning book, and for everybody that's like watching this, right, it's really comprehensive. But with the course, what you're going to see is like how to really, because it can be quite a bit. I mean, like, it's a lot of knowledge, but this is like how to piece it all together, no matter who you are.
It's how to build a system. That's exactly. How to build a system, how to build a conditioning system from A to Z that works every time, any client, for any goal. you have the system in place, you know the methods to use, you know the structure that's there, you know how to coach it. Now you've got a system rather than something that's chaotic and disorganized. Now you have an actual structured way to take someone's conditioning from where they are now to where they need to be every single time with any type of client. And that's what I want to get across as a systematic approach, and that's what you have to have if you want to be successful. Nice.
And if you, like I said, if you're not a master at this stuff, man, this will like completely change the game for you, because there's a bunch of things that I like to promote. Like if it's PN and nutrition, like it's Joel's program when it comes to conditioning. And it's another thing that's like, guess what my whole team goes through? Like they've gone through all the resources, now they're going to go through this, because you have to have a foundation of what's the most, I should say ahead of its time. And it's like, this is what's going to be applicable to your gym. So just let us know where you can find out more about it. I'll put the link in there anyways.
Yeah. But keep in mind, it's only open for a couple more days. We're gonna launch it a couple times a year or so, and really focus on educating and following up the people that go through. And the cool thing is, I've decided that once people go in it, every time we launch a new one, make it available again, we're going to add to it. So I'm going to bring in additional guest speakers. We're going to add more case studies. We're going to do more training, because this is an evolving field, right? No one's got it all figured out. So if you sign up for the course this time around, you're going to continue to get updates. You're going to continue to get more material, as we keep progressing and adding to the course. So it's a lifetime access to this course where you're going to get new material all the time. So and
it's discounted until
Thursday.
Like I said, only 2 launches a year, guys. So if like you're serious about this, like jump on it. Like I said, and the price is like really great right now, because it's like it's going to go up as the launches keep going and as this keeps growing. And like I said, there's going to be more info on it. So, man, that was a lot of stuff. I can keep talking about all day about a lot of shit. I was like, man, what do I even ask? Like, we could go so deep into so many things. But Joel, thank you, man. I appreciate you coming out here. Is there any other sites or anything else they can find out more about you that you can check out?
Everything's just 8 weeks out. They can find everything there, and then BioForce HRV if they want to learn more about HRV and that kind of stuff. And Facebook 8 weeks out. We got our site there.
Awesome.
We got a Facebook page. We keep that up to date a bit, but just go 8 weeks out. You can find pretty much everything there.
8 weeks out, guys. And follow them on Facebook as well, because that's where a lot of the resources will be posted and articles. And there's an incredible amount of just like free content. That's unbelievable.
I got a couple hundred posts these days.
Yeah, I mean,
probably 50 videos. I know we have a lot of material, that's for sure.
There's some articles on there that like literally just give you so much stuff that it's pretty nuts. So go check that out. Thank you again, man. This is Dope Ass Podcast.
Awesome.
Guys, we'll see you next time. Big Life Podcast. Coach Luka out. Peace.